Okay, well, we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us for our October River Management Roundtable. My name is Becca Price, and I'm the Communications and Membership Coordinator for the River Management Society. Our speakers today will give you an idea of what the process of river restoration looks like after a catastrophic flood, and they'll share some lessons learned that you could apply if you find yourself navigating something similar. It's been 1 year since Helene tore through the Southeast. And while incredible progress has been made, there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. So we will hear a bit from each person about their organization's response, some challenges faced, partnerships formed, and lessons learned. And we'll focus particularly on debris removal, bank stabilization, revegetation, and restoration of recreational access alongside infrastructure repair, which is a lot to focus on because there is a lot going on. So thank you all for being here. River management roundtables take place on the second Tuesday of the month. They're open to RMS members and non-members. Anyone who does work on or for rivers is welcome to join us. We are recording, so we will send out a recording afterwards. If you have questions, you can drop them in the chat. We'll go around and hear from each of our speakers, but we'll also invite you to come off mute at the end and share questions then as well. You're welcome to be off camera, on camera, whatever floats your boat. And we just ask that when you share questions or comments, just to be respectful of others that are attending. All right, so we are going to go around and hear from each of our speakers and then open up for questions at the end. Anna, if you would like to start us off and tell us about Mountain True's response, kind of where we're at today, 1 year after the flood. What's next? What are things you might recommend or not to other professionals? Oh, and side note, Jessie Linkus with NRCS won't be joining us because she's furloughed. So we're going to do our best to fill in for Jessie.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. So my name's Anna Alsbrook. I am the French Broad River Keeper at a nonprofit called Mountain True. We're based in Asheville, but we work all of Western North Carolina and then a good chunk of East Tennessee and Northern Georgia. We typically focus on kind of a broad range of issues, but I'm going to speak specifically today to really to the French Broad response, but this can be kind of like extrapolated. We have 5 river keepers now at Mountain True. So there's me, the French Broad River Keeper. We have the Watauga River Keeper up in Boone, the Green River Keeper down in Saluda, the Broad River Keeper in Shelby. And then we just started an Upper New River Keeper program up also near Boone. But today, this is when I'm speaking, I'm just thinking about the French Broad because that's kind of my sphere of everything. After Helene happened, our response, I feel like we had different phases of response as our capacity grew a little bit over time. Immediately we, I think what a lot of people did is just check in on people, your friends, your family, your neighbors. And then also as we could and where we could, we drove around to see what we could see with the river, see what bridges were out, where, what kind of infrastructure was destroyed and where. A lot of assessment, just driving around where we could. And then we did something that's not really in our wheelhouse. We just started setting up tents and grilling out for people around the watershed, at these community centers where folks were coming to get water and information and supplies and charge their phone and that kind of a thing. And I think that's where we really learned kind of the immediate needs of people across the watershed and what their concerns were. Just by like grilling meat, really, we were able to talk to, I don't know, hundreds of people and hear their stories and hear what their priorities were. And that helped us kind of strategize what our next steps were. From there, we took like we did a broad analysis of what was in the waterways and where, and I'm thinking we had heard and seen a lot of wastewater treatment plants were decimated, septic systems were also decimated. There's a lot of industry in or near the flood zones, and a lot of those got decimated. And so people were really concerned with what was in the river and what especially was in the mud as they're starting to muck out their houses and businesses. So we did this broad scale analysis of, both bacteria pollutants as well as kind of industrial toxin pollutants across the whole French Broad watershed to help tell people how they can protect themselves and where and if they need to be worried about certain things as they start to, put their lives back together. So that was a big piece of the puzzle. We also started doing river cleanups where and as we could along greenways. A couple of our campsites got pretty destroyed too, and so cleaning up those. We did a lot of sampling of people's drinking water wells, which is, normally we sample just surface water, but the process of doing surface water and drinking water is the same. And so we were kind of able to fill that niche with that skill set just in a new capacity. And kind of through this all, we've tried to expand what we have done in terms of debris removal from the waterway. We were lucky enough to hire John Stamper, who has been leading this effort since about December, leading first volunteer groups. And then we were able to work with an outfitter based on the Section 9 section of the French Broad. Blue Heron had gotten a bunch of money from a donor to set up sort of like a pilot program of putting out of work raft guides to work, pulling this debris stuff out of the waterway. And specifically, Section 9 is important because it's the whitewater stretch of the French Broad. And so people cleaning that section out really needed to have the skills to navigate the river in addition to having the physical fitness to pull the stuff out. So that was a really unique program where we were able to accomplish a lot in conjunction with Blue Heron Whitewater and its crew. But it also kind of paved the way for where we are now. We used the success of that program to lobby pretty heavily towards the state for extra funding to expand that work across all the Helene affected areas. And so now we've been able to hire, well, let me back up. We did get a contract with the state to do that work, and it's enough money for us to hire 80 people to pull debris out of the waterway for the next 18 months. So those folks are up and running. They're pulling debris out probably as we speak, and we've seen pretty astonishing results through just having that consistent action over time, pulling stuff out of the waterway. And then long term, oh, and then let me back up. We're still, we're in terms of restoration, we've been doing that from the beginning. We've live staked, hydro seeded places. We'll continue to do that for a really long time. And we're taking note of where big projects need to happen and figuring out how to get funding to do those types of projects. Long term, I think I'm really concerned myself with how and where we rebuild. I think, it's probably time to start asking questions of why do we have industry or why do we have hazardous waste sites where they are? And what can we do to get those out of the floodway? What kinds of like education, outreach, policy changes need to happen to, kind of raise awareness that no, we don't need to have gas stations next to the river. That's not a good idea. Let's get them further away. So, yeah, just like monitoring and having the conversations around long-term rebuild, I think is really important.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anna. And we'll come back and touch more on some of the bank stabilization and debris removal work that you guys are doing also. Andy, do you want to share about what ARC&D has been working on and how you guys have been able to plug in and fill an interesting niche with all of this work as well.
Yeah, thanks, Becca. Anna, that's really impressive. Really, everything that you all have been doing. I'm impressed. Appalachian RC&D, we're here in Johnson City, Tennessee. We serve 9 counties in Northeast Tennessee, from basically Mountain City in Johnson County down to Newport in Cocke County, and Jonesboro would be a town in between. And the Nolichucky River, um, the Doe River, the Watauga River, the French Broad, Pigeon. They're basically some of the areas that we're working on. So right after Helene, and by the way, our organization is all about the local food and local farm scene. We have 3 core programs. One is agricultural enterprise and development. Another is equitable nutrition and food access for all, and then farmland conservation. And so anyway, so many of our farmers in Northeast Tennessee were just devastated during Helene. The Nolichucky comes blowing out of the Nolichucky River Gorge, and at 30 feet or so above its normal elevation, and just devastates the region. And many of our farmers are in the floodplain. So they're the ones who, either depending upon what side of the river you're on, they got 3 to 6 foot of sand and sediment, or either they just got 3 to 4 feet of topsoil washed away. What we did at the very beginning was we started a resilient farmer fund, and so we raised about $150,000 to put out in small micro grants to farmers in recovery, and this would cover the items that are not covered by typical government assistance programs or insurance. So equipment repair and replacement, that's one thing. Barn storage shed upfits and repairs and replacement. And then also some soil work. Farm Service Agency does some work with soils and debris removal off of soils, but not really the soil replenishment. So anyway, we distributed micro grants of from $2,000 to $10,000 to farmers affected, and which is really a drop in the bucket for some of them. I mean, we've got some farmers that were, hit with, probably lost. Their losses would amount to $700,000, multi-million dollars. But every little bit helps, and we're trying to get people back in the game. We also work with Tractor Supply, and we're their distributor of fencing and feed to farmers in Northeast Tennessee, sort of their conduit for them, and so sort of regulated and made sure that the people coming in to get things actually were farmers and were impacted by Helene. So that in the process of that, we started, we were having these conversations with farmers, and basically what it all boiled down to is, man, many of them almost all of them have issues with soil reclamation and stream bank stabilization. And so in being involved in this work, we've been associated with the long-term recovery groups in each of the four counties. And everywhere I went, I was always seeing these people from the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture. Forbes Walker, who is a soil expert, and Andrea Ludwig, who is a stream and stormwater BMP expert. And so we were also hearing about the same issues. And I told Forbes, I said, it seems like with all this wood, all these trees that came blowing out and washing out and landing on people's floodplains, that maybe we can do something about mulching those up and actually turning them and helping to start the soil reclamation process on some places. And he said, I couldn't agree with you more. He said, I think that um, the problem is the solution, because there is a problem, but there was a problem with so much woody material all over the place. And so we wrote some grants to get some money from the Tennessee Governor's Response and Recovery Fund. And so now our next steps are, we are working hand in hand with UT and the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the extension agents, and other partners. Mountain True is a part of this Cock County Stream Group. Becca's been involved, and some others, but Jesse Linkus, who's not here with NRCS, she would be involved. But so now we are actually working on the ground and hosting workshops and kind of showing some soil reclamation practices that seem to be working. And we will be working with farmers over probably the next year and a half, 2 years. Actually, to be honest, it's probably a 3-year project, but we've got funding for about a year and a half. We'll be doing this stream bank stabilization and soil reclamation work for a long time. Put a plug in real quick. We've got an information session coming up on, if any of the people on this call are in the area, we've got an information session on October the 16th at the Depot Street Brewery in Jonesboro. We're recruiting volunteers to help do a lot of this stream bank stabilization work. And we will be providing the tools, the training, treating them right too, treating these volunteers really, really well. We'll also have another information session on October the 28th at in Irwin, and anybody can reach out to me, and I can give you information about that, exactly where it is. But it's with a guy who's associated with the Nolichucky Outdoor Recreation Association. One other plug is we've got a Resilient Farmer Fund benefit concert at the Paramount in Bristol on November the 15th. Anybody in the region, we've got really great acts. We're wanting to raise another $150,000 and put more micro grants out to farmers in recovery. And we're sitting at $60,000 right now. Tickets range from $35 to $75, and it's going to be a great time. Cruz Contreras and the Black Lilies, Scott Miller and the Day Lilies, I believe is their name. Several other acts, and anyway, so that's what we're up to. That's what we've been up to. That's where we're headed.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. And I think what you guys are doing is really interesting, because when you think about like what is your traditional river manager or the state and federal agencies do a whole lot. There's a lot of different nonprofit groups that have stepped into like the river management stewardship space, but yours is interesting, and you guys have been able to bring people together in a way that I think that would be difficult for a single agency to do. But anyway, and it's just the different events you're talking about speak to the creativity it takes to really make all this stuff happen. So let's see. Oh, Kevin. Okay, Kevin with American Whitewater. Could you share a little bit about what AW has been doing, and also maybe just kind of give us a feel for like where we're at with infrastructure repair and recreational access?
Sure.
Yeah. At the stage for us. Thanks.
Yeah. A couple of you have mentioned, Anna, you mentioned kind of like the stages that you went through of like how it started like with your family, and then you kind of went out to your community and did kind of more and more as you figured out what the needs were. And I mean, I'm the only person in Asheville, so for AW, so I kind of was on that personal journey first. And then yeah, it was a game of like niche management and triage of like what is our role. And for us, for paddlers, we experienced a lot of change and loss that affects the economy around here. It affects why people live here, the fabric of our community, these places we love. So it was really this information gathering of what kind of what's different out there, what rivers are in good shape, what rivers are in bad shape. And what we really quickly saw was that the there's kind of two storms. There's the hurricane, and then there's the recovery efforts. And if you're a human, looking at human things, the recovery is essential and important and critical. If you love rivers as well, it's kind of hard sometimes because the recovery efforts that are so good for communities in the short term or near term can be really, really hard on rivers. So we saw hundreds of bulldozers and excavators and dump trucks in rivers all over the place doing all kinds of things with and without permits. And kind of one of my first tasks was to like prioritize some rivers that were in good shape, that were threatened by infrastructure projects that seemed to be kind of employing like 1950s mentality to just like mine the rivers for rock and stuff it back under where the roads and railroads used to be. And it was just really shocking to me that that kind of thing could still happen today. You always would float rivers and people say, oh, they could never do that today. Well, yes, they can after a storm. There's a lot of flexibility, and important flexibility in some cases, granted to people that are doing this work. So we engaged a few ways. We just started sharing what we were seeing and learning with regulators and saying, hey, is there a permit for this? Like, do they have to take rock out of the river? Could they source the rock somewhere else? Could they avoid this place, especially because it's really important? And really led our work to a few rivers in particular. The Nolichucky Gorge was a river that was in great shape after the storm. It flooded historically. It was massive changes. Every rapid's different, but from a recreational standpoint, it was sort of a bright spot after the storm, where some rivers kind of got recreationally damaged. I would say the Nolichucky was awesome after the storm. But when the railroad just immediately started mining the riverbed for rock, we were really worried that all the rapids would be gone pretty quickly. Ultimately, that escalated to litigation. So that was sort of an unfortunate strategic end to our work trying to get permits that were protective of the river from state and federal regulators. We engaged more collaboratively on other rivers like the Pigeon and the Rocky Broad, where the rivers were severely impacted by the storm, and they had important roads and communities along them that needed to be put back quickly. So both the Rocky Broad and the Pigeon have temporary roads and road solutions built essentially in the riverbeds, and those will one day be pulled out. And our job so far and in the future will be ensuring that when those road projects are finished, the rivers are left in great shape. And that means they're solid geomorphologically, they're good ecologically, and they support whitewater boating. So that's kind of where we're focused right now, is kind of on a few target rivers. And we've just learned a ton about how fast things happen after a storm. I think advice I would have is ask about permits and call regulators and share information about what you're seeing on the ground before you think you need to. Permits happen really fast in these kind of situations. Sometimes they're even just a phone call. Like the Nolichucky was just a phone call between the Corps of Engineers and CSX that said, yeah, you guys can mine the river. That was it. That was the permit, essentially. So if you care about a river after a storm, start making the calls to regulators, ask questions about can the work be done quickly and efficiently, but also protect some values of the river if at all possible. Let's see. A couple other things I guess we learned. Resilient roads don't always equal resilient rivers. So like I learned this when you go talk to DOT about making the roads more resilient. It means more concrete and like bigger walls and thicker walls and stuff like that. So resiliency means different things if you're looking from the perspective of the river versus the road. So language kind of comes up a lot. There's also no real law protecting a rock in a river that's like, this rock should be here but not there. You would think that riverbeds have sort of a sanctity to them. They do not after a storm. It's really loose as far as like what can and should happen to a riverbed after a storm. And it's complicated because there's value placed on the river as it existed before the flood, but then the flood is considered damage. So the river after the storm, like the river characteristics, aren't granted a lot of value, even if they're great and naturally positioned and, kind of high functioning. So there's a lot of challenges, I think, with just perspective on the value of rivers after floods that sometimes are quite natural, a natural system experiencing natural changes. So I think I'll leave it at that and we can talk more as we go.
And Kevin, could you also share, thanks for giving a brief overview of a very long and arduous process. Could you also just kind of give an overview of where we're at with river access? Like, some rivers pretty quickly reopened and they outfitters had a season and just maybe just compare and contrast rivers that are not open versus rivers that are, and
Sure.
And maybe also the rivers that did open, how did they handle that in terms of safety for either customers or private boaters, just communicating like there might be sharp debris in the main channel,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a mixed bag. It was based a lot on politics, to be honest, about how hard people fought to get rivers back open and who was fighting against it. So it is a political process. It makes sense to develop relationships with your legislators and ask for this to be prioritized in a mix of just so many priorities that are good and valuable for so many different people. So right now, the Nolichucky is still technically all the access is closed for the gorge. The put-in was occupied by CSX. It was Forest Service land. And the takeout was also occupied by CSX to do their railroad recovery. You can use the takeout now, even though it's closed. Put-in is off limits still, blocked by CSX. So Nolichucky has been out. They canceled the guiding season, so that was a bitter pill. People couldn't get back to work, couldn't get back to the river. And the river was fine. We ran it a bunch. It was great, but you just couldn't commercially boat it and couldn't use the normal access areas. The French Broad came back much quicker. It's a much more collaborative process with the Forest Service and the outfitters and the community. They were able to just kind of go in with some help from Mountain True and kind of rough up access areas that are good enough. There's a lot of temporary solutions still right now, which I think is great. It's kind of the right answer, like make something work and come back and do it better with good planning. And that's really what's happening now. The Pigeon is a popular whitewater run. It has part of the river is still kind of closed because the access area was destroyed. So they built a new temporary access downstream a mile. So the run is shorter until they finish up the road work. So it's really been a patchwork of kind of different people working on access, but it is coming back. It's coming back, we're getting there. I think by next year, things will be back to normal pretty much.
We hope so.
Yeah.
And I guess one other recreational access thing that might be cool to share is, there's funding. The disaster has opened some doors to funding, and there are some communities that are like, okay, well, how, we want to bring it back to what it was, or could we even do it differently? Could we improve access? Are there, I know like Unicoi County on the Nolichucky is doing that. They're kind of like, how can we maybe add access and things like that? Are you aware of similar initiatives or maybe like good things or opportunities that have come from this that could actually be beneficial for river access and might be things to kind of just have an eye open for if somebody else were in this situation?
For sure. Yeah, and I'll let Anna weigh in too when I'm done, because I'm sure you've got great stuff on the French Broad and elsewhere. But yeah, the Rocky Broad's a good example. It's a steep mountain river that flows through Chimney Rock. And they, much like the Nolichucky, the community is doing, the town of Chimney Rock is doing a planning process. And then the county is also doing a planning process on an upstream portion of the river. And that's been really cool to see. And they do have like real goals for a better future than it used to be. Better access, a little bit more room for the river to roam. They might build some in-stream features down in town, some grade control structures that are surf features that are fun community kind of swimming areas. given the scale of damage in that area, I think that's appropriate and would be pretty neat for that community. And then the upper reaches will probably be like hopefully brought back to a more natural river when the road's gone. So yeah, Anna, you jump in. I know you're doing a lot of this work too.
Yeah, I will say one of our coworkers, Chris Joyelle, he does a lot of urban planning and design, and he's been working with some of the hardest hit communities from Helene, namely Swannanoa, Marshall, Hot Springs. I think Spruce Pine might be on the list, to really take that comprehensive look of how are we using the land, how should we be using the land, what's important for the community, and prioritizing all of these things. I think that process has been really cool to see how many people are interested in even being involved in something like that. And how it will reshape the communities going forward. From a river access perspective, if Jack Henderson is close to his microphone, I might put him on the spot because he's really the magician behind that river accesses around the French Broad watershed. Jack, are you there?
Yeah, if my signal is good, I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're great.
I can give one example of a pretty cool opportunity in the wake of Helene related to access. We were pretty fortunate on the French Broad in North Carolina that like the vast majority of our access points like were okay, kind of despite some cosmetic repairs following the storm. So there weren't any like opportunities to like add necessarily sites. There wasn't like a priority around that. But in Cott County, Tennessee, around Del Rio, we lost two public access points in between the Wolf Creek boat launch, kind of there, which is managed by the U.S. Forest Service. It's the first public access point in Tennessee, and the Highway 2570 boat ramp, kind of closer to Newport. And so that section's like a 12 or 13-mile section of river, and it gets a fair amount of use, especially for overnight paddlers and also some commercial use with the nearby outfitters in Newport. But there were two kind of informal, but also I learned a little bit more formal than I thought, access points around Del Rio, about mile 6, one of which was owned or managed by the U.S. Forest Service on the Unaka Ranger District, and then the other was just like an old informal right-of-way spot, and both of those were completely washed away. They were just they were within the narrow area between the road along the river and the river itself, and that area was just lost to erosion. But in the last couple of weeks, I've been working a lot with 10 Green, which is like a Tennessee statewide land trust, and the Conservation Fund to look at purchasing a property that's actually for sale right now, right around Del Rio, which is like right where Fugate Road crosses over. It's right about mile 6 in between. And they're super excited about that. The county's excited about that. The Forest Service is even open to maybe acquiring land in that corridor, given even though it's not adjacent to their current property. And so that's an opportunity where we've kind of prioritized the need for access, but not just access, but like good access. And so this site would have like more space, have like a ramp, kind of better usage versus the kind of informal spot before. So Tennessee has been a bright spot in terms of recovery there.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. Well, we had hoped that our friend Jesse could speak to bank stabilization efforts. The Natural Resources Conservation Service is pretty involved in that. They have some programs for private landowners, and I think particularly farmers. And then they're also involved when there's road repair and they want to do riprap along that. But anyway, she's not here to give like the full landscape of how they're involved and opportunities with them, but I'm hoping that we can patchwork together our shared understanding of just kind of what's being done to stabilize the banks, including some revegetation and kind of just addressing some of the challenges where, you have federally owned land and they can do their whatever they want to do with that, and they're approaching it differently. The Forest Service is taking sort of a different approach than the state agencies, and just as an example. But a challenge is that you have rivers flowing through lots of privately owned land. So who pays for if grading is needed, and if anyway, who pays for it? What materials are being used? Just kind of what does this process look like? And my feeling is it's kind of just starting in a lot of places, unless it's like a road or railroad being rebuilt or a bridge. A lot of the private landowners, we're over a year in now, and it's really just getting started, it seems like. And there's a big outreach effort. So just how do we triage, fund, outreach? What does this look like? Anybody?
Yeah. Well, I think you're correct, Becca, in that with private lands, it's just really now getting started. And, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, they are, I mean, they kind of, they're limited, I can't speak for Jesse, but I have worked with NRCS for a number of years on things, and, they are limited in working just with farmers, and they can't go out and do the, active outreach and recruitment. Farmers have to come to them. Okay. And then a lot of times the process can be sometimes a cumbersome process, a very tough process to get through. So with that, and then with also just, I know in the state of Tennessee, well, with that, first of all, I think it takes time. All right. So they don't have the staff to respond. They don't have the capacity to respond to people as much as I know they would like. They're responding to a lot of people, and so there are a lot of stuff is getting done. I was just at a site the other day that's the pasture's been reclaimed. The grading is taking place on the bank to turn it from a vertical bank, undercut and just actively eroding to a 2-to-1 slope. So it's in better shape. But the state of Tennessee, the governor and the legislature responded pretty well. I think but as all things, well, I'm not going to say all things, but as a lot of things with government, it takes a long time. And so, for instance, we put our grant into the Governor's Response and Recovery Fund back in May to pay for a lot of this stuff, to answer your question about where the money's coming from to do this bank stabilization. Well, we just got our contract signed last week. And so, we have, as an organization, we had enough money to be able to go ahead and front load some work and get started, but we can only do so much. So I think that's kind of one of the lessons learned, I think, too, is that when something like this happens, it's better to be prepared so that it doesn't take 9 months to get started on something after the fact. But now, at the end of the day, a lot of what we do is putting in trees and shrubs and grasses and things like that. Now, some of the bank stabilization, some of the grass work could have been taken care of earlier in the year, in the spring or whatnot. But, we're actually coming into the winter where that's when it's time to plant vegetation anyway. So, anyway, does that help answer or respond to the question that you were raising, Becca?
Yeah. And I think one other thing I think that's neat that's come out of this, which Anna or Andy, I know you guys have been in the meetings in Cocke County. There's the University of Tennessee Extension, agricultural extension, and several partners have worked on a tool that it's like an app, and anybody can use it and go to a site and can take a picture of their bank and describe different elements of it, and it goes into a bigger map that's publicly viewable and will rank sites as high impact, medium impact, low impact. And they're kind of still figuring out like how to roll this thing out, but I thought it was a really interesting example of just collaboratively like triaging these sites so that you can figure out what properties and how to get funding to these people. But I don't know if you guys want to, I kind of just said what I was going to ask you. So
Can I offer a
in.
cautionary tale on bank stabilization?
Yeah.
We were just in a meeting. We're doing one of these large collaborative visioning processes and planning processes around the Nolichucky, the lower Noli. And, we're talking about potential riverside trails and stream bank restoration and kind of doing a lot of public outreach on what people want to see on that stretch of river. And in the midst of that, there was a permit let to riprap 9 miles of the river that we were talking about through the county. So I think that would basically obliterate a lot of the values we were trying to plan for and to bring back to the river. So it was these two conflicting visions, probably siloed in communication channels of who's doing what. So I think it's a cautionary tale because somehow the right people weren't talking to the right people, and there were two different visions for this river being developed. One was kind of faster and easier and do it the old way, which is riprap, and the other was this new way of bring in the public and let's plant trees and shrubs and things like that. Hope we get through it. I hope it works out well. We figured it out. Maybe it's too late. I hope it's not. We're gonna do whatever we can to try to let the riprap happen where it really needs to and bring back other values where we can, and hopefully there'll be a solution.
And Kevin, you kind of, I guess a theme that runs through all of this is collaboration. And could you all speak to how do you, there's lots of different meetings taking place. There's this group doing this thing and this group doing the same thing maybe, but in a different sort of way. Or how do you get the right people in the room to go in together on grants, to share information? And I think a challenge of it is this stuff, you're not necessarily ready to share all the information with the public because you're building the plane as you fly it, but you do need to how do you get all the people to the table, and kind of what does that look like? Or are there, I don't know, any advice on that?
I don't necessarily have advice on that, but I will say, from my experience, if I want something to happen and I just need to do it. I don't know if that makes sense. So there's been several instances where I'm pretty sure somebody's got to be doing that already, and they're not. And so in order to see change made in that direction, you just talk to people, get them in a room, see if they feel the same way, or, at least have passion towards it. Yeah, there's been several times when I'm somebody's got to be doing this, and then they're not. And so we kind of step up to fill that hole. But yeah, I'd be interested to hear if other people have ideas on that question.
It's such a hodgepodge. Go ahead, Andy.
I just echo what you say, Anna, and in our group, the group that we just suddenly found ourselves in this group that we're calling the Cocke County Stream Group. It just materialized in Cocke County, and really there was one person, Ashley Kite Rowland at the Tennessee Department of Forestry, who convened this, and she just did it and brought all these agency partners together who then, through their circle, opened it up to other nonprofits, and even private for-profit businesses are involved. And that's actually been kind of magical, to be honest with you. That just sort of materialized. But it didn't materialize without somebody to actively, lead the charge.
Yeah, it's been a real hodgepodge for me. I've been brought in on a lot of things that I feel like have been super helpful. And if I don't feel like I can be helpful, I just bow out. But I think if a project doesn't have a recreational view, like a recreational person in it, and someone there with geomorphology and an actual stream ecology experience, it's probably not going to work super well for the river, at least, and for the river community. So I'd say look around the room. We always joke at AW, you got to do math with numbers. Let's do math with numbers. And for rivers, that means geomorphologists and ecologists at this scale of intervention we're talking about. So they're absent from a lot of meetings.
Here's a question. Who pays for those people to come in? When, the state maybe does, how do you fund bringing in that expert opinion, because these people's time isn't free, and that's a tough question to answer, and one that I'm not sure we have answered, and why they're not there.
We asked them to do it. Oh, we did. I helped Ashley set up all that stuff, and we just asked them. It should be a no-brainer that after an emergency, every available person who works for anyone gets off their butt and helps. It's unconscionable that there's meetings and all this crap. They should be out there doing stuff immediately. We've been involved with that EFRP stuff, and I mean, some of them makes no sense. Why did they haul off the stuff they shredded up to some guy's property that's private when they could stabilize that? So she's good at getting people together. We just ask them. I mean, like, for instance, the way we got Andrea Ludwig, all this, the UTs, just stuff like that. Networking. And just, you don't pay attention to get paid, you pay attention.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think there, some things happen so fast. It's like, we're watching like you said, all this material is being hauled off, and, in some cases, too much material or live trees are being pulled out of the ground. And it's, so, I think some things have happened so quickly that it's like, we're coming in after the fact, and people are like, whoa, why did this happen? Or where is this material going? And could it be used in a project? Or could, I think, Andy, you mentioned the soil reclamation work they're trying to, repurpose this mulch to make like biochar, right? So but it all comes back, I think, right, to having all these people at the table, and it's a hodgepodge, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, agreeing. Yeah. And it is a hodgepodge. It has been a hodgepodge, but yeah, I think part of this is part of the work that and I see Andrea is on the call, Andrea Ludwig. I think that part of our work is that we do want to create a kind of a manual, for later, for when this happens again, because Matthew's right. All the trees being taken out and taken out, hauled away, mulched, hauled away to another place, paying a private landowner to hold it when there are other private landowners that are sitting there with it who could have used it, so that's a lesson learned that we've got to convey into the future. But it's happened before. The same thing has happened in the Gulf Coast states, and a lot of these private contractors that sprung up from responding to that need and that demand in the Gulf Coast are the ones doing the hauling away right now. And I don't begrudge them any for making money, and I appreciate that they were willing and able to get up here so quickly. But I do think that contracting process went very quickly, too quickly, and there was not much oversight. And anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, going down a rabbit hole on that, but
I don't think that's a tangent. I think it's really important. I think that there's regulations in place that drive outcomes with money, and some of those laws and policies could be changed to be a lot more beneficial to communities that have just been through a big flood. And I do think that's like the playbook is, how can we like change just a little bit of how FEMA does debris removal funding, which Anna knows more about than I do, but so that communities don't experience what we did, which is, after the storm, you see these big trucks driving up and down your rivers, yanking, riparian vegetation off and cutting it down and taking it away instead of leaving it in place. How can we just give rivers just a little bit of weight in the scale and a little bit more consideration in the future values of these rivers through policy changes? I think that's key.
Kind of on that note, are there things that you all feel people could do let's say they have not just sustained a major flood. So hopefully some people on this call, and I see a lot of local folks, but what could people do maybe to make their communities more flood resilient, or to already have in place these lines of communications, or you know, things where you do have the recreation people in the same room as the you know, I don't know, all the different people already talking. I'll stop talking.
I'll hop in here. Hi, everybody. Andrea Ludwig. Happy to join the call and just offer up one resource that I know at UT Extension here. We have Dr. Shelley Rampold. She serves as our disaster and crisis communication specialist for UT Extension. And so a resource could be, you know, all the state land grant institutions have, you know, some form of the extension service, and likely have an ag communications department that probably offers some sort of like extension disaster recovery response program. And so what Shelley's been working on is, you know, pulling together a lot of resources about crisis communication and planning, and just the way that she's able to think about and talk about, you know, planning for disasters and responding to disasters in a way that prepares you for the next disaster. You know, it's like a seamless spectrum for her, right? And so to be able to pull people with that expertise into our circles, you know, I think a lot of us are working kind of in like this river management zone that we've been talking in, but having that kind of like crisis management and planning component be at the table and be more present. I know, you know, disasters we never want to think about disasters until they're here, and then that's all we can think about, right? But I think this kind of disaster planning piece is just going to become more and more important for communities. We saw it kind of evolve out of the wildfire recovery work that was done. You know, at least in my sphere, it was a lot in response to Gatlinburg and other recent fires in this part of the world. And I think we're going to see that now kind of more with these flooding issues, now that we've had our experience and Texas has had theirs, and there's been other examples. So, you know, I think we can, you know, learn from each other, you know, pull those people into our conversations as much as possible. And then, you know, as unfortunate as it is, just having kind of like disaster planning more front of mind in a lot of the work that we're doing. And again, kind of seeing at least one resource. I know that we all have our resources here, but the Extension Service, there's a national network of extension disaster education network. It's called Eden, actually. And so that could act as a library of a lot of resources where we can really kind of institutionalize a lot of these lessons learned.
That is an excellent point. Thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, guys, we have 7 minutes left. If you have questions and you want to come off mute and ask questions of our panelists, it looks like we've got a hand raised by Walt Parker. Go for it, Walt.
So a couple things, and I'm going off of memory, so forgive me if I lose my train of thought. But the question someone asked was, is there someone that maybe might know everything that's going on? What I would hope that people on the call understand is that every river in the U.S. is considered waters of the U.S., and they are the responsibility of the Corps of Engineers. So your Corps of Engineers district, and because the Nolichucky flows into the Tennessee River watershed, and New River, two examples, flows into the Ohio River, you're going to need to find out which district has control over your watershed. And there should be someone at that district or one of their sub-districts that has a big map and pretty much knows as much as anybody what's going on, or at least everyone that's asked for a permit. So I know there was the issue that came up with the rebuilding of the CSX rail line with the Corps of Engineers permit. Hopefully in the future, as the rail lines are calling the Corps of Engineers district saying, hey, we need to get this rail line back in place, someone on this call would also be calling the Corps and saying, hey, let's make sure we do this right before you issue a permit to folks that are doing work in the river. So that would be the first thing. A second challenge that I don't know how to answer is a lot of the material that's in the river that we could have saved or should have saved is actually mixed with human trash. So how do you separate? How do you pay someone to do the judicious? Well, let's keep this tree, but take that pile of tree that's got various pieces of lawn furniture intermixed with it, because that's one of the challenges with doing the debris removal. And lastly is another part of the education program is just folks want to get the debris out of the way because they're traumatized and they probably have nightmares of another flood, remobilizing all that stuff and destroying even more things downstream. So part of it is just trying to inform the public with as much of the knowledge of what's good for the river, how that's going to be good for them in the long term versus kind of getting over the trauma of what just happened to them or what's just fresh in their minds. So those were just 3 thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Walt. Allison has her hand up.
Hi, everybody. I know it's great to see some of you that I know, and it's really nice to be meeting and interfacing with others of you for the first time. My name is Allie Williams. I'm the hydrologist for the Cherokee National Forest. And I was hoping I could take just a minute to give an update about debris removal from waterways on the Cherokee National Forest. It's a little bit ironic because in some ways, the lack of preparedness and some of the bureaucracy that others have spoken to have resulted in us on the Cherokee being able to take a slower approach to assessing the debris in our waterways. And we got some guidance from our National Stream and Aquatic Ecology Center, which is a research unit that supports the entire Forest Service. And they've been through big floods across the country, and they called out immediately that stream cleaning was going to be kind of the major concern. So the very first question we asked on the Cherokee was that our leadership asked is, can we be part of the TEMA contract and just efficiently clean up everything at once? And the answer was no. There was no mechanism for that because of the way FEMA reimbursement works. Federal lands could not be cleaned up using that contract. And so that gave us some time. And we completed an assessment of all of the water bodies on the north zone of the Cherokee using Survey 123, and we put each debris pile into a risk category. Does it have propane tanks, hazmat, construction debris? All that stuff clearly needs to come out. But if it's just wood, is it threatening infrastructure? Is it an elevation where it's likely to remobilize? And so we completed that assessment a couple months ago. And as you know, it's been a little bit of a challenging time in the federal government. And so we are sort of just on the threshold of being able to issue a contract for strategic removal of debris that needs to come out. And I wish that could have happened faster. I'm happy to share our assessment guidance with anybody. It really was pretty easy, kind of once we figured out the categories and got the survey 123 up and running. So that's coming soon. And then just another update, we are working with the Corps of Engineers for a couple of locations that are more sensitive for a variety of reasons, including Jackson Islands and Farm on the Nolichucky and Weaver's Bend on the French Broad. And we do expect in the next couple of months, kind of depending on what happens with the shutdown. I'm not furloughed, I'm funded by disaster funds, but it's dynamic in the organization in terms of our contracting organization and actually being able to get the support we need to implement those projects. So just wanted to let y'all know that was coming. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ally. Real quick, Michael, we'll come back to you. We have a couple closing slides. I just want to, scroll through real quick, and then we can let people go. And if folks want to stay on, we'll stay on. I can. And real quick, just want to thank our panelists. We covered like a ton of ground on a huge topic, and just really appreciate your time and expertise, and you guys being here today. We do record our river management roundtables. Again, they happen every month, and they are on our YouTube channel. So you can go back and see this there, as well as past topics. We have some upcoming events that we can include these in the follow-up email, but they're also in our website calendar. We've got a river career series going on right now. These are free and geared towards students and early career professionals. We have a Southeast chapter, Cahaba River trip coming up. There's some very cool speakers on that trip. And then our next roundtable is working with landowners to advance river and water trail projects. So that will be super interesting. And then after that, using fluvial geomorphology for stream restoration and watershed management. This is an incredible workshop that we were doing once a year. We're now doing twice a year. It's in-depth short course with Dr. John Field, and people love it and find it very beneficial if you want to get in the weeds on stream restoration. We'll send out a survey link. We'd love to hear from you. If you have suggestions on topics we can discuss in our monthly roundtables, that's what they're here for. So let us know what you want to talk about. Okay, we've gone up just slightly over. Micah, I believe, had a question. If folks want to stay, you're welcome to. If you got to go, we understand. We appreciate everybody being here. Micah, if you want to share your question.
Yeah, it was less of a question and more of just thinking on one of the things that you had asked before about like how do communities become more resilient, that maybe either they haven't had a flood like this or us who were thinking about the next one. And just somebody mentioned also like maybe not having gas stations in the floodway. And so like things that come to mind is doing the work to like figure out where the like current catastrophic flood zone is in that area, because that was something that I didn't know pre-Helene, and now I'm very aware of like where's the flood zone and where's the new flood zone, and things like that. But also the other thing that caused a lot of trouble on the French Broad, I'm with Asheville Greenworks in Asheville over here, but on the French Broad is that there was like an open air storage facility that housed a whole bunch of PVC, and it's literally on the banks of the river. And so it's like looking at communities that are invested in the river and different organizations invested in the care of the river, looking at what's along your waterways and seeing if there's ways to work with the county, the community, with businesses, and figure out ways to incentivize getting things that are going to cause large amounts of debris that's going to be really hard to remove if you're in that state out of that way. And I don't know how to incentivize businesses to move large amounts of things that will become debris in a flood out of the way in a way that works for them. But that's just something local communities working with city or county, something to think about moving forward to make ourselves more resilient.
Thanks, Micah. And where are you located?
Yeah, Asheville, North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were in Texas, or we were talking about Helene or Texas, but thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is challenging for sure. Jack, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to add something that I thought of when Allie was talking about her district. One thing we've been successful with, and again, I work for Mountain True with Anna on the French Broad Riverkeeper team, is like as we bolster our capacity as a nonprofit to do river stewardship and debris removal, we've like been decently successful in making the case for a limited approach, by some of these bigger Army Corps of Engineer style contractors. So for example, in Madison County on Section 9, like they're basically done out there now in terms of big scale debris removal because in part we made the case of like, hey, we've got resources and funding now through the state and otherwise to do this our own way. And they're like, great, like we'd love to get out of here and kind of, stop getting critiqued and breaking our machines. Like we'd love for you guys to do this yourselves, which is a double-edged sword because it makes, allows us the opportunity to do it the way that we'd like to see it done. But then we're left with that responsibility to a certain extent. So like, we're doing that now a little bit now too in Cott County, in the Weaver Bend area with the U.S. Forest Service and through some funding through a separate fund given it's in Tennessee. So just that to say that, if you've got the ability to project manage some of this work yourself and bring on crews yourselves, like do that. It can be really successful, but also kind of think about, what responsibility you're willing to be left with in terms of, stuff left out there. So just wanted to add that because it was relevant to Allie's comment.
Awesome. Thanks, Jack. And Amy.
Yeah, I was just, y'all were talking about how some of the rivers were able to be open to recreation. Some of them remained closed for safety reasons and or just logistical reasons. For those areas that were able to be reopened, what was like the public perception of that?
I think it was very positive. Most rivers were open immediately after. It was just the ones that were severely impacted that were closed. Sections of the French Broad. But I think people were ready to get back to normal by the time we were talking about reopening the damaged access areas, which was months after the storm. So there wasn't that animosity towards people getting back out on the river right away because really that wasn't an option in a lot of places.
Okay, so it was like when you said immediately, it wasn't like they could get to the river, but it really wasn't immediately. It was a little while after.
Yeah, lots of rivers were fine after the storm. So it was really just this like the corridor of severe impact where access areas were closed. And then they were talking about reopening them. That's the action that like can get people upset, I guess. And
yeah,
I mean, I'm curious what Anna would say too, but it seemed like by the time we got the French Broad reopened, people were just pretty happy about it. Am I right about that?
No, I think people were itchy to get outside and do the things that they love to do. I know I was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with mountain bike trails. I mean, everything. People just after a few months, people were over that impact that was being experienced.
I think for context, so I'm in Texas over in New Braunfels. We're on the Guadalupe, about 100 miles down from Kerr County. So major dam and lake in between us and all of the destruction. And so we reopened after a week and we got, severe public backlash for quite a while for being open, even though we weren't impacted like Kerr County was. So I was just curious what y'all's experience was like.
There was a lot of confusion around what was impacted and what wasn't even. Like you said, there's rivers 40 miles away that didn't get high at all, or even the upper French Broad didn't really get that high. So yeah, there was some confusion around that. I think just generally people kind of thought, oh, the whole region is a disaster zone. And really it was like a strip, that came through.
Great, thank you.
Good to see you, Amy. Any other questions? Final thoughts? Oh, we've got wood removal guidelines. Save that. I'll include this stuff in the follow-up email. Okay.
I'm grateful to hear all the perspectives, and I think it's a little too late for me to ask, but I guess I just feel like you all dabbled in like what are the take-home lessons for river managers, or what are the like action plans for the future for communities? And I think that's, if we had another hour, maybe we could drum that up. I feel like Kevin kind of talked a lot about it and it was brought up in different ways, and Allison gave references, and I hope we can follow up with an email with links and ideas, and I think you all are heading that way. But thank you for doing the work you have done, and I hope all your work can help in other communities. I'm here in West Virginia, and I think there's lots of places in the world that can benefit from the hope that you shared, as well as the learning process that it sounds like you're still going through. So I guess I wanted to ask a question, but I feel like it's so big that maybe we can leave it at that and follow up as we go down. And
Sarah
Thank
is
you.
our RMS journal editor, and if you would like to submit your long form thoughts on lessons learned from this disaster, she would gladly print them.
I would be happy to.
Yeah, there's also if you check the chat, there's this collaborative group on Helene impact and recovery assessment and monitoring. They are looking at like long-term policy changes and some of the other like what can we do about this? So I'm involved with that
I've
group.
been frantically copying everything from the chat, but Becca, is that conveyed in the follow-up?
Yeah, I'll go through, I'll include this attachment from Allie and any comments that would be relevant for other people. So yeah, I'll include that.
I don't know what goes away after we hang up, but I'm like, save it all.
It's in the cloud.
Thank
Okay,
you.
all good. Okay, well, thanks so much, you guys. Thanks for staying over. Keep fighting the good fight, as it
Bye,
were.
everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you, Becca.
See you guys.
Thank you.